Welcome to another episode of Dr. Brook on the Block. It's time to grab a seat, buckle up, and take a ride with me through the wild, wild west of the Web3 universe, where we're going to learn all about coins and tokens, NFTs and contracts, digital real estate and the metaverse, and so much more. There is a lot to get through on the block, but I am here to pave the way and help you avoid those nasty pitfalls and rug pulls so you don't get hurt. I'm going to also introduce you to some interesting characters along the way. Are you ready? Your ride starts now. Hey, Dr. Brook here with another epic episode of Dr. Brook on the Block. I am joined by an epic co-pilot, Nick Odio. Did I pronounce your last name correctly?
You did, Brook. Thanks.
Perfect. Yeah. Nick is the Chief Growth Officer at Ferrum Network, and we're going to get to learn all about Ferrum Network and what they're doing in the Web3 space. But before that, I just want to say a little bit about what he does as the growth officer of the company. He deals with the product side of things, the growth initiatives, deals with partnerships, and figures out which blockchains they're going to connect with. But you're going to get to learn a lot more about Ferrum Network once we get started with the episode. Thank you so much for being here, Nick. Really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. So first things first, every guest gets this question. My listeners know this by now, but we want to know, how did you arrive in the Web3 world today?
Yeah, so I think my story kind of starts off as I was a bit of a idealist in terms of what sound money should really look like. Ever since I can remember, really, as soon as I kind of got wind of how the Federal Reserve worked and how our money wasn't really backed by anything, I started doing a lot of digging in history in high school even, and became pretty adamant about abolishing the Federal Reserve and all that kind of talk that so many folks in Web3 seem to have kind of gotten their roots where their roots started. So in 2017, a friend of mine said, like, man, you've always been talking about how I know and it sounds like kind of like a long time to really find out about Bitcoin. 2017, after being like pretty adamant about that, about the Fed and all that prior. But a friend was like, man, you've talked about this for years. Why don't you like invest in Bitcoin? Do you know about Bitcoin? Do you know about blockchain? And I was like, I mean, I've heard of it. Like Silk Road and stuff like that,
right.
But like, yeah, tell me more. And we watched a documentary on it, and I was like, oh my gosh, where has this been my whole life? How have I missed this?
Yeah.
And it pretty much touched on all of those kind of those things that I was passionate about in terms of centralized banking systems and things of that nature. So and how to circumvent that. So I dove pretty deep down the rabbit hole, and within a few months I was already investing into like low cap alts and things of that nature, and weathered the crypto winter that ensued pretty shortly after, because I caught that hype train, unfortunately, at the peak of the bull run. I think it was like October is when I got in. So I was like, man, this is never going to end. Crypto is just going to keep going up and up and up.
Yeah.
And that was kind of my rude awakening into the way that markets work. But stuck with it through the bear, and kind of started to see where Web3 was heading this in the next bull run, which happened these last couple of years. And during crypto summer, DeFi summer, I should say, I started investing into a lot of like low cap DeFi plays, and my interest had kind of moved into DeFi, and started messing around with a lot of different like DeFi protocols and whatnot. And I found a company called Ferrum Network, who I invested pretty heavily in. Really loved what they were building at the time, and I joined their governance committee and started contributing kind of as a community member, and came on board the team about almost 2 years ago now, because they've been around since 2018. kind of an old school project that's always done a really good job of moving through the space and figuring out how to evolve and pivot when necessary, and always provide value. And I saw that as a sign of strength, and I wanted to be a part of it. So about 2 years ago, I came on board the team when we were about six employees only. And so I was like one of the first few people to be hired after the founders, Naeem and Ian, had started the company. And since then, we've scaled the team to about 35 employees now. So
great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I want to connect some dots just for the listeners, because right now you might be listening to this episode going, well, we are in a bear market. We are in a crypto winter, so to speak. But Nick is actually talking about what happened in 2018. So he got in 2017. We went through a crypto winter in 2018. There was another bear market at that point. The bear is still out right now. It's come out of hibernation. Just take this opportunity, like I say on so many episodes, is to learn, and educate yourself on the space. That's what we're doing here with Dr. Brook on the Block podcast, and getting to introduce you to cool characters like this. So that's a really fun story, Nick. I am with you in terms of the Federal Reserve. People know when they listen to this that I never will say the US dollar, because there's no such thing as the United States dollar. It's the Federal Reserve note.
Totally.
So we're in alignment with that. I didn't get in until early 2021. So you definitely have some years ahead of me on that. But with that being said, thank you so much for sharing that amazing story, and, the rabbit hole that you dove right into and getting you here. So let's really get the listeners understanding what Ferrum Network is doing, and maybe try to explain it in elementary terms as best as possible. And then I'll kind of piece together some things if I see fit or see a need.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, Ferrum our main focus is interoperability. We got started as a blockchain as a service company. So we were creating different white label products for existing projects in the space. Got started creating staking as a service solutions, which we've deployed for a couple hundred projects across multiple ecosystems like Binance Smart Chain, Ethereum, Polygon, Avalanche. We've just integrated our first non-EVM compatible network, Algorand, with our product suite. That started back in 2019 and has continued since. So those staking as a service solutions have been deployed for a couple hundred projects, about 200 projects across multiple ecosystems. We've had a lifetime TVL, which is total value locked in those staking contracts, of about $500 million. And it's allowed us to create a very broad ecosystem of partners, which we call the Iron Alliance. The Iron Alliance it consists of projects from multiple different ecosystems across the space, and from metaverse to gaming to NFTs to DeFi to layer 1 and layer 2 networks themselves, to auditing firms, all sorts of stuff. We've grown a very big community of ecosystem partners through these products that we've been deploying for a few years now. That evolved into an incubator. A lot of projects started coming to us saying, hey, we realize that you've got a big ecosystem of partners. You have a great suite of products. You seem to navigate your space around navigate your way around the space really well. We're going to launch a project, and we were hoping you could advise us. So we saw that as another opportunity to create another vertical, where we started a Ferrum Advisory Services. It's a branch of the company that helps incubate projects, pretty much from pre-architecture, before they even decide which network they're going to launch on, all the way through token generation events, TGE, and beyond. Wow. And so we help them with fundraising, designing tokenomics, introducing them to VCs, centralized exchanges and DEXs for liquidity purposes, pretty much run the gamut with those projects, and then be a tech provider for them once they actually launch their product after they have their TGE. And so that's kind of been, those two things have kind of been our bread and butter for a long time, and those two things have allowed us to generate revenue, which is something that a lot of Web3 projects can't say for themselves, right?
Right.
A lot
Yeah.
of times it comes down to like, let me sell some tokens so I can pay salaries. Well, with
Right.
us, like we've
Absolutely.
actually never had to sell any tokens of our own for the purposes of paying salaries. In fact, our tokens are still vesting. Our team tokens are like
Oh,
we
cool.
haven't even touched any of our
Yeah.
team tokens, and we actually just extended the vesting for another year. And so we've got like a 4 or 5 year vesting. I think it's from 2019 to 2023, 4-year vesting schedule on our
Yep.
team tokens, which is unheard of. Most people
Yep.
have like a year and then the team starts getting tokens. So
Right.
we've been able to generate revenue to pay salaries and actually scale the team through a bear market from about 6 employees to about 35 employees is what we are right now.
Yep.
So that's kind of like, it reflects a company that would have raised tens of millions of dollars, whereas we only raised 1.2 million back in 2018 and have been able to scale the team because of products and services that we've been able to offer. So that's kind of gotten us to where we are now.
Okay, so first you guys started as like the service, the staking as a service. Then you went into the incubator and helping other, and then now you guys are doing something called Interoperability 2.0, correct?
Yeah.
Is that the core product of Ferrum?
Yeah, that's the core vision right now, I would say,
Okay.
of Ferrum, which is kind of compiled of multiple different products, I would say.
Okay. Can I want to briefly say something really quick just for the listener. So when Nick is saying interoperability, or when I'm saying that, essentially what that means, to break it down into like understandable terms, is there's multiple different blockchains out there. And essentially those blockchains are like little silos or little containers in which they like exist. So if you think about, I like to use the analogy of countries, like the United States is a country. We have different things that exist within the United States that may not exist in Canada and Mexico. But we also have the ability to transport across border lines into Canada or into Mexico via train, via car, via plane. However, what Nick is saying Ferrum is going into is the ability to get out of that silo blockchain like Ethereum or Tezos or Solana or whatever blockchains, and be able to cross borders and interact with those seamlessly, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's a really cool analogy. I've never heard the country analogy.
It's mine. Don't steal it. It's mine.
I think I'm gonna steal it. I'm sorry.
Okay, Nick is on record. He just stole my stuff. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. No, that was a really good way of putting it. So yes, interoperability we think is super, super important because right now I feel like we're operating as a space in Web3 at a fraction of how we should be operating. Developers are very much siloed from each other in terms of what sort of projects they can work on across those borders that you talked about because of the siloed nature of Web3 as it is right now. So in Web2, in terms of like being able to deploy applications across different operating systems, something called Node.js came into play for Web2 and allowed for a lot of these applications to be deployed across multiple different operating systems. We're essentially doing that for Web3 is kind of one of the ways we describe this. So interoperability for a long time has just been viewed as something that means bridges, right?
Yes.
And moving assets across networks. But that's really not true interoperability, right? That's just interoperability 1.0. And that's where we get this interoperability 2.0 that you can see on our website. And like, what does that mean? Well, interoperability 2.0 goes far beyond just being able to move assets across networks. It's being able to move arbitrary information, data, and messaging across networks, so enabling developers to actually deploy multi-chain DApps and multi-chain smart contracts. So imagine an application, right? We all use applications in Web3, and typically those applications only live on one network, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But imagine an application that could not only live on multiple networks, but also leverage the unique selling points and the value propositions of those specific networks. So imagine an application that could use the speed of Solana with the security of Ethereum and the built-in governance of Polkadot.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're talking about like some real robust decentralized applications that can be spun up, because we're kind of circumventing the whole blockchain trilemma of speed, scalability, and decentralization,
Right.
if we're able to leverage the unique selling points of each individual network. And so that's what Ferrum Network is building, is a multi-chain messaging engine that allows for developers to build applications in a single environment and deploy them across multiple environments. So we're not like an ETH killer. We're not coming in and trying to like beat ETH. We're trying to bring all the networks together.
Right. And pull the like you said, the pieces of each of those chains that are great, like the security of Ethereum and the quickness of Solana, and bring all of those good aspects and those good pieces together so that people like when I hear you say that, what I'm thinking is this is how we reach mass adoption. This is how we hit scale. This is how we do all of these things, because living in silos, like really condensing people down to just being in the United States and you can't travel and this is what you have to do. We've all lived that 2 years ago. We don't want to live that. We want to be able to travel amongst different places, throughout the world. And that's how you may not have the listeners I'm speaking to, you may not have a technical background and may not understand some of the things that Nick are talking about. When he talks about DApps, essentially it's a Web3 term for decentralized applications. It's no different than the apps you use on your iPhone or the apps you use on your Google Android phone. It's no different. Like the Uber app still works on the iPhone and the Uber app still works on the Google Play Store. Like that is deployed in both operating systems, right? And you're able to use it just the same. And so that is the beauty of, like, I'm listening to it and I'm like, wow, that's super incredible. Like what's going to happen as a result of that. So very cool, Nick.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, we think so too.
Yeah, definitely. So this is the new vertical that Ferrum is going into. They're going to keep the other two verticals going, though, other stuff. So is this brand new to 2022? Because I did notice the roadmap only showed Q1 2022 and up through obviously the end of this year and what you guys are looking to accomplish.
Yeah, so we've kind of taken a bit of a phased approach with this, where we started back about a year ago with the Ferrum cross-chain token bridge, right? Mm-hmm. So how we talked about like interoperability 1.0 was bridges, moving assets across networks. That to us is still the jankiest piece of infrastructure in the entire space, because we've seen about $2.5
You said janky, guys. No,
janky. Yeah. It's the best word I could think to describe it.
I love it.
Yeah. We've seen about $2.5 billion worth of assets siphoned from these interoperability protocols over the last just within this year. I think we hit 2.5 billion, and then last year was a total mess too. And the reason this keeps happening is because of the architecture behind most of the way these bridges are designed. And it employs something called a mint and burn, or a lock and mint mechanism within the bridge. So that means that every time an asset is deposited into a bridge, a wrapped version of the asset is minted on the destination chain. Wherever you're trying to bridge the asset to, there's a wrapped version. I'm sure everyone's seen like WBTC, WETH. Those are wrapped tokens. But in order for, because you've got supply and demand, right? So like in order for a token to maintain its supply, the version on the origin chain has to remain in a pool to maintain the peg of the wrapped asset that's being deployed on the other network. Because if they were all to be released, then it would mess up the tokenomics and the supply of those tokens, and it would reduce the value. Right. So anytime a wrapped asset is minted on a destination chain because of a bridge, there's an equivalent amount of those tokens sitting on a bridge somewhere. Right?
Sitting on the originating blockchain.
Totally.
Going through.
Yeah. And typically that's managed by a third party bridge. And so it creates something we call honeypots, right? So there's a lot of money, hundreds of millions, billions, sitting on bridges all around the space right now.
Mm-hmm.
And who's like, licking their chops back there? Bad actors,
Winnie the Pooh. No, just
yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, the honeypot, nice. The Winnie the Pooh hackers of the world, right?
the Winnie
Exactly.
the Pooh hackers, exactly.
Yeah. And that's enough of an incentive to warrant somebody trying to spend 2 years in order to figure out a way to exploit these bridges, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we did at Ferrum, we were like, all right, we need to reinvent the way that assets are moved across networks. And we came up with this kind of definition of our own definition of multi-chain versus cross-chain. To us, whenever you say cross-chain, it represents some sort of wrapping or minting mechanism that's inherent in a bridge. Whereas multi-chain means it's existing on multiple networks. So the native state of the asset exists on multiple networks. So when we launched our own token on multiple networks, we didn't have a wrapped version of the token. We had the actual native asset deployed on BSC, Polygon, Avalanche, and Ethereum. And we're kind of deployed on these multiple networks to test our theory of how we could create a better bridge from an architectural standpoint and an operational security standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've been able to do about $200 million worth of volume on our bridge just within our token. Our token in the last year has done about 200 million in volume across the bridge. This is just our own community. But it's done this with very little liquidity in the bridge pools at any given moment. No more than $1 million of liquidity has ever been sitting idle on these bridges, and the bridge has never had interactive or operative control over a token contract, meaning the bridge has never been able to actually mint any tokens. It's not part of how we move assets across networks. So it's more of what we call a proof of authority bridge. So people can deposit their tokens into the origin chain bridge pool, and a series of oracles and our node infrastructure relays the message saying that an equivalent amount can be removed on the destination chain. But since we're only holding about $1 million worth of liquidity at any given time, everyone says TVL is good, total value locked is good. Total value locked is really good in DeFi. It's not good in bridges, and that's a common misconception. Everyone's like, "Wow, there's hundreds of millions of dollars sitting on that bridge." It's like, that's bad. Like, that means someone's gonna go exploit
That's like the
it.
honeypot. The honeypot. That's $100 million in the honeypot.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to figure out a way where we could still support the same amount of volume with a limited amount of liquidity, so that from an architectural standpoint, we're not minting any tokens, and from an operational security standpoint, we're not incentivizing any bad actors. Needless to say, our bridge has never been exploited because of that, knock on wood. But still, even if they did, it would only be about $1 million that could be exploited, as opposed to tens and hundreds of millions.
Right.
So from a psychological standpoint, people just don't want to do it.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Well, if they're a bad actor, they're looking for big dollars, not, little, like, they're not looking for the coins under the couch cushions. They're like, where's the vault in the house? Right? Like,
exactly.
if they're coming in trying to be all crazy like that. So that's really, that's such a fascinating piece. You guys are like probably the only ones in the marketplace doing this, because I've never heard of, doing transfers the way that you're talking about it. Obviously, we know the janky system that's happening currently. So yeah, very cool. Thank you for sharing that, Nick. I want to talk to you about Polkadot, because you're using Polkadot. Not Polkadot. What's the other word that you attach to that? It's Polkadot.
Yeah, so .sama is kind of a hybrid word of Polkadot and Kusama.
Okay.
Kusama is Polkadot's canary network, so it's like their sister chain that kind of serves as an incentivized test net, so people can kind of build on Kusama first, and then if it works, deploy on Polkadot. Sometimes you see people building in parallel. on both networks. So they have their own canary network, their own testnet. But
Yeah.
that's the word there is .sama. So it's Polkadot meets Kusama. And then the other word that's important in Polkadot and Kusama is substrate. And substrate is the
That's the one that I saw on the website. That's the one that I was like, yeah, please, yeah. So what's a Polkadot substrate?
So substrate is so there's a couple different languages in Web3 that coders use, right? That developers use. The most like prominent one right now is Solidity, and that's what's used in EVM compatible networks. So EVM means Ethereum Virtual Machine. So any network that can, essentially the best way to think about this is any network that you can use in MetaMask is an EVM compatible network, right?
Yeah.
And so those are all kind of on the same foundation as Ethereum, using the same virtual machine as Ethereum. So that's Solidity. And a closely following Solidity in terms of popularity is a language called Rust. And Rust is what's used in Solana. Rust is used in networks like Casper. Rust is used in a multitude of other networks out there. Pretty much all of the non-EVM compatible networks are using Rust, except for a few. You've got Algorand, which uses PyTeal, which is their own language, Cardano, which uses Haskell. But Rust is pretty much being used on a very widespread basis right now. But there's these different kind of iterations of Rust. And one of those iterations is Substrate. Substrate is basically a kind of a dialect of Rust, so to speak, if you're thinking about it in terms of languages, right? And so it's kind of their own take on Rust, and it's what Polkadot uses. The parity team is who's behind Polkadot, and Substrate is what's employed by Polkadot projects, Polkadot themselves, Kusama, and Kusama projects. And it's a very, very powerful language that allows you to do a lot of different things. So is
that why? Okay, so then to come back to the why question, so why Polkadot Substrate with Ferrum Network? That is, how are you guys deploying that for what you guys are trying to do, or how are you using it for what you want to do?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the founders of Ethereum, along with Vitalik, was a guy named Gavin Wood. He since branched off. It's interesting. I think they're going to make a movie about this, actually.
They branched off a lot. Even Charles from Cardano was.
That's what I was going to say. So
yes,
Charles, Gavin, and exactly. I'm glad you said it. That's super cool. They all three kind of like started Ethereum, and then they all branched off and did their own thing. And it could be argued that those three ecosystems are the three most competitive ecosystems in the space right now. You've got your Cardano maxis, you've got your Polkadot maxis, and you've got your ETH maxis, and they all make a case for themselves. In terms of what we're trying to do, Polkadot and Kusama seem like the best choice for us because they're very focused on interoperability, right? Gavin came out at one point and said they're taking a bet against blockchain maximalism with Polkadot, and that's essentially what Ferrum is doing, right? But what Polkadot does is it allows for all of these what are called parachains. They're networks that exist using Polkadot. Polkadot is the blockchain of blockchains, right? So with Ethereum's a layer one. You can build applications on top of Ethereum. Polkadot is something that's called a layer zero. Now, there's only one true other layer zero in the space, which is Cosmos. But Cosmos and Polkadot allow something very interesting for developers to do, which is build their own blockchains, right? Ethereum just allows people to build their own applications, right? Cardano allows people to build their own applications. But Polkadot allows people to build their own blockchains using the runtime of Polkadot as this, it's basically the consensus mechanism of how transactions are finalized on the network is using Polkadot, but then they're able to build their own what are called parachains that utilize Polkadot's consensus mechanism, but can actually be their own live
Layer
their
one.
own, their own layer one, exactly.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so you can build layer ones on Polkadot's layer 0. And
So in my analogy then, like, because this just came to me while you're talking, like Polkadot would be the Earth, and then all the parachains would be the different countries within the Earth.
that's a really good analogy. Boom. Yeah, you
There
nailed
it
it again, Brook.
Awesome. Very cool. So that's why you guys chose Polkadot, because the ability to then branch out further and further and further. Cool.
Yeah,
That is
sure.
so awesome. I know I've asked you a lot of questions about, Ferrum and like the future. Let's go back briefly before we start to wrap ride Q3. So I did look at the roadmap. You guys are doing some cool stuff during Q3, which is I guess we're sitting in Q4 now.
We're in Q4
What?
now.
Yeah, we're in Q4.
Time flies.
How are you
Almost
guys
Christmas.
doing Huh? I know, right? A couple of weeks till Christmas. So wild. It's insane how fast the year's gone by.
I know.
How like close are you guys to hitting all the deadlines and the points on the roadmap?
Yeah, so this quarter we're really focused on something called multi-swap. So you know how I talked about a little earlier, we had the first iteration, which was that interoperability 1.0, which is the cross-chain token bridge, right?
The janky,
Yeah, and figuring out how we as Ferrum could move our own asset across networks without, subjecting ourselves to exploits. Well, that product is evolving into something called multi-swap, and multi-swap is really cool because it allows for you to not just bridge asset A for asset A on another network, but swap asset A for asset B on another network. So multi-swap allows you to swap any asset for any other asset on any network that we're integrated with, as long as liquidity exists on that network.
Right, on the other side.
Any wallet, yeah. So it's a game changer product, because right now it's really, really difficult for young ecosystems to attract new users and to attract TVL, to attract that total value lock that we talked about, right? And the reason it's so difficult to do that is because the user journey and the user experience of getting there is so difficult. If you want to move your tokens from Ethereum to BSC, let's say, you go to Uniswap, you swap your asset into a bridgeable asset, then you go to a bridge, and then you bridge it into the network, over to the network that you want it on. And then you go to CoinMarketCap and you go, okay, where can I trade this asset that I want to buy? And you go, it's a place called PancakeSwap. So then you go to PancakeSwap, and then you swap that bridgeable asset into the asset. But before you do that, if it's your first time using BSC, I don't have the RPC into my MetaMask, so now I have to go in and I have to Google how to find the RPC, and so you enter it all in, and then I don't have any BNB token so I can't pay for gas. So you hit up a friend, you're like, hey, can you send me some BNB? Or like you go to something called a faucet and you get a tiny bit of BNB so that you can make the transaction. And now your journey in BSC in the BSC ecosystem has started, right? So
my God. I'm laughing hysterically because it's like it's no wonder why we haven't reached mass adoption, because of that journey people have to take. And I know what steps you were talking about. I know those things you were talking about, but a lot of my listeners are going to be like, what did he just say? It's not going to be like that forever. And this is what Ferrum's doing. So continue. Sorry. I just had to say that.
You're right. Again, and it kind of sucks that, people don't, know how to move their tokens across other networks, because and it's our own fault, right? I mean, we got to make this easier. And granted, I mean, we've done an incredible job up until now, but we keep improving and making this user experience easier and easier to understand. And that's what multi-swap is going to do. It's going to allow you to move any asset to any network with one interface, right? One application. You don't have to use a bridge. You don't have to use a DEX. You don't have to use two DEXs. You don't have to go to CoinMarketCap, figure out where the liquidity lies. All that is being handled on the back end. And what you're experiencing is basically just like a trade on Uniswap or a trade on PancakeSwap. But what's happening is it's trading it into a bridgeable asset. We're using USDC because USDC exists on all networks. You don't have to mint it. You don't have to wrap that version of the token. So remember how we were talking about how wrapping tokens is bad and minting tokens is bad? USDC exists on all these other networks. So we just swap it into USDC. We bridge it to another network. We swap USDC into the asset that the person selected on through the multi-swap interface, and we add their RPC for them. It's already added there. And we're actually exploring something called gasless transactions, which would mean that they wouldn't have to hold the token that they would need to pay for gas if it's their first time using that network. That could be paid in on the origin chain where they do have the network's token. So it would just be, you know, a couple clicks and boom, they can go participate in this new network. So when you were asking about what's on our roadmap, that's our big one for this quarter. And so you kind of see that as like interoperability 1.5.
Yes.
Right? Because it's like it's halfway between like, you know, our bridge and true interoperability. It's a stepping stone, right? But you know, true interoperability is going to come up sometime next year when we build our parachain. We do our crowd loans, which is how you secure a parachain slot on Polkadot. And so that'll be the next step after multi-swap, and we'll have a white paper coming out talking about the main net, which will be coming out sometime next year. And so yeah, but for Q4, that's our big one, is multi-swap, and we should have a proof of concept testnet for the mainnet out as well, so people can kind of go mess around with it. So we're shooting for multi-swap for sure, and we're shooting for a proof of concept testnet so that people can kind of get some ideas as to what our mainnet's going to look like next year.
That is so awesome, Nick. I'm so excited for not only you, but the whole Ferrum team to get all this stuff put together. And then also for the people like myself and listeners who get to engage in the ecosystem in such a easy, simple kind of way. Because, I mean, the reality is blockchain technology is going somewhere. People get somewhat caught up with crypto and, oh my God, the market's going down and everything's going to zero. But they don't focus on the technology, which is blockchain. I don't care if Bitcoin goes to zero. It's what blockchain technology is doing. And you guys are doing incredible things in this space. Thank you so much for being here. You literally, this was such a fun conversation for me. I loved bantering back and forth and saying janky a bunch of times on here. So
yeah, Brooke, thank you so much. And I want to say one thing about what you just said about blockchain being here forever.
Yeah.
I am in Bogota right now, Colombia. I came down here for DevCon.
Cool.
Is like the biggest crypto conference in the world, right? And there must have been 20,000 people here. I don't know what the head count was, but it was huge. And here we are, like bottoming out at 19, 20, right? And Bitcoin is just kind of like just staying stagnant, and everyone's really bored, and everyone's like, is crypto going to stick around? Is it going to be here forever? You know, as a retail investor, you might find yourself thinking that. Well, as somebody who is building in this space and was just at the biggest conference in the world, DevCon, some of the things that you hear people talking about, you're like, wait, we weren't here from a technological standpoint during the bull run. And now we are. And so the fundamentals of where we're at in Web3 do not reflect in like where the market sentiment is at right now.
Yeah.
Because these people are talking about things like ZK rollups, DAOs kind of having their footing now and having some ground to stand on, decentralized autonomous organizations, they're taking over. You've got different types of token standards, different types of NFTs coming out, NFTs being used for like real world applications.
Totally.
Like the stuff that they're talking about now at DevCon this last week was leaps and bounds ahead of where we were 6 months ago even. And so when we talk about Web3 being here to stay, it was super validating seeing how many people are still building, the quality of the things that they're building, just like mind-blowing stuff that just goes right over my head, but I know it's powerful. You know what I mean? It's pretty incredible. So yeah, Web3 is here. People are still building in the background regardless of, what Bitcoin and Ethereum are doing on the price charts. So.
Okay, so in your opinion, last question: are we early, late? Did we miss the boat? Where are we at, in your opinion?
No, we have definitely not missed the boat. Like I know, like earlier,
you heard Nick say it. Nick said it too. I always tell you guys, you're still early. Learn.
You see so many tweets from people. It's so funny how you see all these tweets from folks like, man, I wish I would have bought Bitcoin at this price.
I know.
And then it's like 2 years later, like, I wish I would have bought Bitcoin at this price. And it's like, those tweets never age well, right? You're always like, just like get in and just let it ride, get your feet wet. And, they always say it's really easy. Buy it, support, and sell it, resistance.
Right.
Not financial advice, but I mean, we've been sitting at 19-20K for a minute now. I feel like we're on a nice support line, and that was our previous all-time high from the last bull run. So, I do firmly believe that one Bitcoin will cost $1 million a day.
1 billion?
1 million. 1 million.
Oh, 1 million. Okay. I was like, Nick is the first person I've ever heard say that. So cool. We'll see. We'll have this on record when it hits that time frame. I'll pull this episode from the archives and be like, Nick, remember when you said that? So very cool. Well, Nick, how can listeners like connect with Ferrum more? How can they connect with you if they want to? Please share.
Yeah, for sure. So definitely Ferrum.network is our website. Can find a lot of information about what we're doing on the website. Definitely follow us on Twitter at Ferrum Network. And Telegram is another great place to get information on what we're doing. That is Ferrum_network. I'll
put all the links in the show notes too, so it's easy for people just to click on and get right to where they need to go. So
nice. Yeah. So Telegram, Twitter, join our Discord. We're really trying to get our Discord popping lately. So hop in there. We'd love to see you in our community. Twitter, Telegram, Discord, and then for all information, go to the website.
Awesome. Thank you again, Nick. Thank you so much for being here. This was so fun for me. I hope it was fun for you guys there listening. And you know the drill. As we pull this ride into the station, make sure your arms and legs are in at all times. We are going to have you exit to the right, and I will see you on the next one. You made it. Congratulations. That wasn't so bad, was it? I hope you laughed and learned a little bit more about this Web3 universe and how simple and fun it can really be. Would you be so kind as to leave us a review and share it with your friends and family? It would mean so much to get this out to more people as we embark on the greatest transfer of wealth that has ever happened in human history. Can't wait to see you on the next one.